What is home to you? Gina, one of my research participants, states, "That's a really good question. I philosophize a lot about that. I hope you don't expect me to give you a straight answer." Academic research has focused on understandings of home among migrants from a literal and figurative standpoint, emphasizing the theoretical consequences of leaving the original home behind. Greg Madison's work is an exception in both the method and the conclusion, which focuses on the rather poorly understood motivations behind voluntary migration and its impact on home. This presentation uses Madison's study as a starting point to expand on the understandings of voluntary migrants' complex relationship with home. I have chosen to study an unlikely candidate to elucidate home, the one who continuously migrates. In particular, my study focuses on a subsegment of voluntary migrants who have moved internationally out of desire rather than need. This group has been absent from academic research. My analysis seeks to investigate the type of individuals that willingly uproot themselves continuously to experience life in different parts of the world. I call these individuals compulsive migrants. Compulsive migrants' frequent international moves make it more difficult to locate a sense of belonging in place and are therefore the perfect research subject for a study on home, as home cannot be based on place alone. During the research process, the question of home evolved in unanticipated directions. Compulsive migrants hold complex notions of home. As well, compulsive migrants' cultural identity impacts the motivations for repetitive migration. Thus, I argue that for compulsive migrants, home is an interplay between three things: a cosmopolitan cultural identity, boredom, and a sense of belonging based on a familiarity with a culture and its people. 8 in-depth interviews with compulsive migrants create a theoretical framework of their understanding of home based on the specificity of individual lived experiences. For my purposes, I define a compulsive migrant as someone who has migrated from his or her country of origin voluntarily at least twice and has the intention of migrating again in the future. This excludes economic migrants who move for education or improved employment, those moving to be with a partner, and forced migrants such as refugees. Compulsive migrants seek opportunities abroad because they truly desire to live in different countries. They uproot themselves for reasons that they usually do not understand. They differ from travelers by staying in their chosen locations for at least a year and settling, with a permanent address, work or study, and a social life including friend groups. Because visas to live, work, or study in foreign countries can be difficult to obtain, most compulsive migrants are educated, skilled workers with some disposable income. Compulsive migrants are part of a transnational elite, as described by Saskia Sassen, and they include corporate expatriates and NGO workers, humanitarian service workers, and diplomats, amongst others. They benefit from their mobility as they can monetize the international networks they build from their transnational lifestyle. Furthermore, they are likely to belong to what Richard Florida calls the, quote, creative class, unquote, defined by its professional status of working in a creative capacity that drives economic profits. My interviewees, 3 researchers, an engineer, an advertising strategist, a freelance journalist, a project manager, and a kitchen chef, are all in professions that depend on creative abilities to produce new ways of thinking that can broaden concepts, set agendas, and influence others. Compulsive migrants are a highly mobile group of educated professionals that seek experiences beyond what their immediate surroundings can offer. They tend to have an insatiable thirst for exploring unconventional thinking and the unknown, both in their private and professional lives. Often misunderstood, they have to constantly explain their decision to migrate, particularly to friends and family who perceive them as abandoning their homes. They have to justify their decisions to move to those left behind as well as to their new social groups. These characteristics are a universal migrancy phenomenon, which may be exasperated by the compulsive nature of this type of migration. What differentiates the compulsive migrant from other types of migrants is the desire to migrate for the sake of experiences. Following Jacques Lacan, David Oswald demonstrates that desire is a means of compensating for a perceived lack in an attempt at self-improvement. In the case of compulsive migrants, this leads to repeated migration. The research participants discussed belonging as a way of defining home. Most commonly, they established a sense of belonging through relationships with other people. Robert, one of my research participants, envisions home as, quote, a place with a nice quality of life where you have people around you, friends, possibly family, because that is what makes a home, the people you're with, unquote. His comment confirms theories by Sarah Ahmed, Nigel Rapport, and Andrew Dawson that describe social interactions and encounters as a support network that makes one feel at home. Robert further describes familiarity of place and people. Quote, once you have lived in a country for a bit, you have friends and you understand how the place works. It doesn't seem alien to you, so you can feel at home there. A big part of it is when you become used to a place, when it doesn't seem strange anymore. Unquote. Familiarity involves knowledge of the location as well as an understanding of the alien culture. Quote, how, unquote, one belongs is thus more important than, quote, where, unquote, one belongs, as theorized by Fiona Allen. The unfamiliar is what causes excitement and the thrill of discovering a new location and people. The familiar is what creates a sense of belonging. A sense of belonging based on familiarity with the culture and having social relations, including local friendships, can be encompassed in the concept of home as interaction. Interactions with the environment and people are necessary to become familiar with the culture and develop a sense of belonging. Home as interaction may explain the basic needs that have to be met for a compulsive migrant to feel at home, but it does not explain why the same does not apply for the compulsive migrant's place of origin. It also does not suffice as an explanation for why compulsive migrants continue moving. To better understand the compulsive migrant's notion of home requires further consideration of their motivations. Luis is the only research participant who describes himself as, quote, citizen of the world, unquote. However, other interviewees demonstrate this cosmopolitan cultural disposition that includes a heightened desire to engage in cultural experiences, alien mannerisms, and customs. Florence, a New Zealander, exhibits cosmopolitanism by actively choosing places that provide her with new and foreign experiences. She says, quote, moving is about meeting new people and starting a new experience. It forces you to grow. And that's attractive. One of the things that turned us off of London was that a lot of New Zealanders go to London and we really want to experience something new. Unquote. Florence is drawn towards cultures that differ from her own. She discusses her friends in New York, being from all over the world, and she's able to learn about different behaviors and ideas through their interactions with them. Florence calls it, quote, eye-opening, unquote. Many interviewees speak of the benefits of engaging with foreign cultures and people. Robert, for example, decided to learn how to play the cello and join a semi-professional orchestra in Germany. He could have joined an orchestra in his native England. However, Munich's ubiquitous orchestras inspired the idea. Joining an orchestra helped him integrate into the city's culture instantly. Quote, I hit the ground running. And after a month, I realized it was a really nice place. I liked the culture, as a foreigner. Unquote. This qualifier, as a foreigner, acknowledges that if he were a local, he may have felt differently about Munich, because it would have mandated involvement in everyday life issues. As a foreigner, choosing his level of engagement is easier. Through limited involvement in politics, for example, but full submersion in Munich's orchestra culture, Robert selectively experiences life in Munich. While this could be perceived as problematic in the framework of a cosmopolitan cultural identity, Roberts' selectivity highlights his sensitivity towards the world as a world citizen, a global as opposed to a local engagement. Hillary believes that changing her environment gives her the ability to reinvent herself in a never-ending process of self-improvement. Quote, "Somehow every time you move abroad, you're free to invent yourself anew. Because you're doing something different, you're living somewhere else, you have a completely different circle of people around you." Unquote. Leaving behind the life she knows gives Hillary the confidence to explore aspects of herself that she otherwise may have left undiscovered. A freedom emerges from the challenges caused by placing herself in new environments and situations. She compares the experience of migration with drug-induced euphoria, claiming that she, quote, "gets hooked on the high of learning new things," unquote. She describes challenges as a means of providing new ideas and feeding her imagination, leading to creativity and inspiration. The overseas experience enhances her cultural capital, which she values highly. Hillary's comments reflect Karen O'Reilly's and Michaela Benson's analysis of migrants perceiving mobility as enabling their self-realization, a process Anthony Giddens sees as emblematic of modernity.